Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930 and this is a review for the current beta build of the upcoming shooter game Postscriptum. Postscriptum is a World War II military simulator coming to Steam August 9th. Unlike more common shooter games, Postscriptum focuses on being as authentic as possible, with realistic damage, weapons, and overall gameplay. This type of game will appeal more to fans of role-playing games than your average shooter fan, as you'll likely be spending a lot of time walking and talking to teammates than actual shooting. If you've played games like Arma, Red Orchestra, Squad, or Project Reality, you should already know what to expect with this one. So, what sets Postscriptum apart? Well, Postscriptum is one of the very few large-scale, realistic World War II shooters on the market. This game allows players to participate in massive 100-player battles in huge maps on the Western Front. There's no single-player story campaign currently planned, and there doesn't seem to be any planned AI bot support for solo or cooperative play. But oddly enough, Postscriptum's online community, even in its current beta build of the game, which was only available to those that pre-ordered the title, is incredibly healthy. The game's server browser is filled with heavily populated servers across the world, most of which may require you to wait in a queue to join. It's refreshing to see this in a PC game, considering how much of a niche market these simulators are. And if you were worried about this game's online community dying out, you can rest easy. The community itself is also one of the more friendly I've encountered in a long time. Most of the players in each squad communicate well with each other and stick close to accomplish objectives. Squad leaders and team commanders can communicate directly with each other to coordinate more big picture tactics and do so often. The text chat isn't bogged down by annoying spam or people calling each other hackers, which is also refreshing to see. The community just seems focused on enjoying the experience instead of trying to be at the top of the scoreboard. So, what about the gameplay? Well, like I said, this is a military sim, so the gameplay will be much different from other World War II shooter games like Battlefield or Call of Duty. Movement speed is much slower, and you'll be forced to travel extreme distances either by vehicle or on foot, with combat sometimes not occurring for long stretches of time. And when you do enter a combat situation, it's often incredibly confusing and stressful, just like I assume a real engagement would feel like. Player names are not displayed over enemies, and uniforms look so similar that I often found myself aiming at an enemy and not knowing whether or not to pull the trigger. This could be fixed by making the friendly player UI more clear, as the small blue and green font often gets lost in the environment. An option to adjust the size of the UI elements or change the color would be a nice addition for players that struggle with this. But if you play enough, you should be able to distinguish between friendly and hostile uniforms pretty easily. Postscriptum features a class system structured around the section or squad type you join. There's 2 available tank squads, a logistics squad, and multiple infantry squads to join, or if you want, you can apply to be the team's commander. Each squad type has several different classes to choose from, but these are available on a first-come, first-served basis, and are also dependent on the size of your current squad. Smaller squads have access to simpler loadouts like riflemen. The riflemen are only given standard-issue bolt-action rifles like the Lee Enfield or the Kar-98, but are also capable of building sandbag walls to help fortify positions. Medics handle pretty much as you'd expect. They're given several morphine syringes to revive wounded players, and bandages which can be used to heal a player or yourself to 100%. All other players are given bandages, but can only heal themselves to a certain point before requiring a medic. Larger squads have access to loadouts with machine guns, marksman rifles, bazookas, mortars, and squad leaders even have access to either an STG-44 or a Sten SMG, depending on which team you're on, making them great for rushing fortified positions and buildings. Since each loadout is limited, there's never any feeling of a class feeling overpowered, and to keep the experience authentic, there doesn't seem to be any way to customize your weapons or loadouts. The tank crews will only be given a handgun and a few tools to help with maintaining their vehicle. The tanks are only drivable by these tank crews, which helps to keep players focused on their specified roles, and not fighting over vehicle spawns in the main deployment. Tanks are incredibly difficult to control, and will require everyone in the crew to work together to be efficient. For the Tiger tank, you'll need a driver, a turret operator, a secondary gunner, and a scout that can pop out of the top hatch and provide necessary communication. Vehicles only offer a first-person view by default to help keep the experience as authentic as possible, so the scout's communication is critical in avoiding a sneaky enemy player from sticking dynamite in your tailpipe. The logistics team's job is to build forward operating bases and hunt down enemy spawn locations. They can drive a special construction truck that allows them to build FOBs, and can also create ammo caches to benefit their team. I haven't managed to play as a logistics team yet, as there only seems to be 4 players per team allowed to participate, but there's no question that they're an important part of the team. But maybe not as important as the team's commander. The commander's goal is to coordinate squad objectives and provide support with things like artillery and airstrikes. Squad leaders will need to give very precise coordinates when calling in airstrikes, and it's not uncommon to hear players communicate with very specific keypad grid reference numbers. The planes themselves sound awesome and are just as terrifying as they should be, especially if you have a gut feeling they're coming for your position. But it's a shame there's no way to control the planes themselves. It would be cool if there was another section added that allowed for a handful of pilots that can only deliver an explosive payload rarely and given specific orders from the commander. So what about the actual movement and the combat? Well, generally, this is a common problem when it comes to these military sim games. Movement in combat is often stiff and clunky, but Postscriptum isn't as bad as other games in this regard. The controls are intuitive and straightforward. You can sprint, jump, aim down sights, crouch, go prone, and even vault over waist-high objects. One feature I really like is that you can sprint when lying prone, meaning you can crawl really fast, and I wish it was a feature in other major shooter games in addition to being able to sprint while crouched. Another cool feature is how the game's vegetation slows down your movement speed. This is a great feature, especially considering how difficult it is to spot enemies hiding in the hedges on each map. The game's world is densely populated with props and vegetation that I found it extremely difficult to spot enemies in the world, and most of my kills were on players that were completely unaware that I was even watching them. Trying to aim at enemies that are already shooting you is basically impossible thanks to the suppression system. I'm not really sure how I feel about this though. I feel as though I shouldn't be artificially unable to control my weapon because someone is shooting in my direction. I get the idea behind it, but if I was actually nervous while being shot at, then that should be reflected by my own poor aim, not because the game is wrestling my crosshair off the target. I do like how there's absolutely no hit indicator or real way to tell if you killed an enemy unless you actually walk up to confirm the kill. There's no kill scoreboard to check on or kill feed in the game, and you won't even know how many enemies you've killed until after the match ends. And matches won't end for a very long time. Some matches even last multiple hours depending on how successful the attacking team is. Attackers are given about 20 minutes to control the first objective, with bonus time awarded after each successful capture. There's a ticket system as well, but I've never seen the tickets exhausted on either team. The maps are absolutely gigantic and supposedly based on real-world maps for an even more authentic feel. This often results in a lot of long jogs to and from objectives, but good spawn truck placement can get you back into a firefight within a minute or so. Postscriptum will only feature 5 maps at launch, all of which seem to be based around the Market Garden operations, and each map is practically indistinguishable from the last, with lots of flat green terrain, a ton of hedges lining the sides of long roads, some thick forested areas, and some small towns with a ton of empty sandbox-style buildings to hide inside. I'd like to see some more variety down the road, with other theaters of the war and more than just the British and German forces. But thankfully, Postscriptum will feature its own SDK, allowing for custom-made content from the community. So you better believe we'll see plenty of additional maps, weapons, and factions added at some point. But even without that community-made content, I think the content available in this base game is more than most independent games, especially with an experience of this scale. So what about performance and graphical quality? Postscriptum uses the Unreal 4 engine, and is probably one of the more impressive looking Unreal 4 games I've played this month. The game's lighting is very realistic, especially the global illumination on props like the game's vegetation. Textures on environmental objects like buildings and the ground look very good, and weapons have a very authentic look to them. Most impressive are the game's special effects like smoke and explosions. Tanks explode very realistically and reminds me of the awesome explosions in 2007's Crysis. The character models could use a lot more variety, and the animations could use a ton of work as they appear very stiff and robotic at the moment. And worst of all is the game's performance, which sits at a miserable 40 to 60 frames per second on average with a GTX 1080 Ti. The game's high object and vegetation density is likely to blame for this subpar performance, but thankfully the game's slower pace makes this almost a non-issue. The one thing that does bother me though is that lowering the game's visuals to their lowest values gives players an absolutely huge advantage. Not only is performance obviously much better, but the shadows are mostly non-existent at the low preset, making it incredibly easy to spot enemies hiding in bushes or in the forested areas. I'd like to see this game's performance improved on by the full release, and a way to force certain game-breaking visuals on users with low preset settings to help keep the gameplay fair and consistent. The game also hard crashed on me at least once, and I had a few instances where my character became stuck in the world geometry, forcing me to enter in a console command to redeploy my character. But these issues were rare and far between. The game is currently available for $30, and from the looks of it, there doesn't seem to be any shady business practices like loot crates or season passes in sight. So I think I can safely recommend this game, and keep a close eye on it when it releases August 9th on Steam. If you want to find out more about Postscriptum, make sure to keep it tuned to my channel. I'll be doing some gameplay and graphical comparisons between other popular World War II games, and we'll have a more detailed review when the game releases in the coming weeks. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this posted every week.